Hey, good morning. Welcome to the second of our Celebrate Jean birthday party. And another winter where we really need to have a party together. We thought that last year, and it was such a lovely thing that we did, celebrating Jean's birthday party and remembering him and enjoying him together. And I'd like to start with the sound of my bell from Jerusalem, and just to center ourselves and to hear the sound of this bell from Jerusalem. And I'll explain the picture in a minute after we center ourselves and come together. I wanted to share this picture with you this morning because whenever I would visit Jean in his house upstate, I would find him sitting by the door, these double doors, looking out the door, no matter what time of day or morning or evening. And he would say, "Oh, I'm looking at the out there, that the big system," he would say. And he was so inspired by the trees and being in connection with nature and with the big system. And I thought we would start our celebration looking out at the big system with him. Yes, it feels so good to join all of you and to join him in this celebration of the big system. I think about Vivian, who I think is here from China, and she's been planning these focusing oriented therapy classes in China. And she was saying to me, I wanted to do it about focusing oriented therapy and spirituality, but there's nowhere that Jean mentions spirituality. So I'm very, very confused, because all of the focusing people seem very involved with spirituality, and yet Jean never mentions that. And I thought that was such a wonderful thought and comment. And for many of you who are here today that that didn't know Jean and might be confused about that, is focusing spiritual. What I know, and we're going to all share our knowledge together, but what I know is that Jean said, "Oh, if you talk about spirituality or those spiritual words that have been ruined for many, many people, you lose half the people, and you don't need those words. You can talk about the whole thing without using those words." And for me,
I only have like one.
Jean and his work is very, very much about that big system that we're all a part of. What I want to celebrate this morning about Jean and remember was his voracious curiosity, an incredible curiosity that encompassed everything. There was nothing that he wasn't curious about, in that kind of open, generous way. And I think that open, generous kind of curiosity was so much connected to his basic, fundamental, embodied sense that life is forward movement and that life is evolution. You get to know something deeply, and it looks like it's destructive. It looks like it's creepy. It looks like it's adversive, and we get to know it even more and more intricately. We'll find out how it, in its way, is trying to carry forward, is trying to live, that life wants more life. An instance of that I some of you might have mentioned when I first met Gene, and I was so enamored with his amazing mind and way of looking at things and thinking about things and connecting. And so I started a study group with him, and then I went into therapy with him. And when I was as a client consulting with him, I told him that I was involved with a woman, and that I was had bad experiences of people being anti-gay and I was worried about his reaction to that. And he looked at me with this sort of naive look and said, why wouldn't I want to know about that? Why wouldn't I, if I didn't know about it, be curious about that? What a wonderful thing I could learn from you about that. And that was the beginning of our relationship, of my taking in and making part of my world his amazing curiosity that had about it, endemic to it, fully, intricately involved in it, the sense of the sacred. The sense of the sacred was in everything that he wanted to think about and to know and to connect with. There's a video that Nada Lu put on the coordinators list, and maybe later we'll see a little bit of that video of his helping her with TAE, and it's a wonderful example of that way of thinking and that curiosity. So I welcome you and really want to hear from all of you, as many as can speak, and I'm turning this over now to Melinda, who will do the second welcome.
Good morning and welcome, and afternoon and evening, wherever we are located. It's really wonderful to see so many people I haven't seen in a while, and it means a lot. I happened this morning to look at a video that I guess Lynn and I had collaborated on, Welcome Gene Day, before he passed in 2000, I think it was 2013, and sharing, you know, what he meant to us then, which is really nice that we did that while he was alive. And then subsequently last year, we did the first one after he passed. And just thinking, because of this, we could do this every year, and something new will go forward, something new will be shared. We'll all remember another facet of Gene. And I was just thinking this morning how Gene is like, for me, was like a diamond, that because I worked with him in a different way than most people had relationships with him. We all maybe are really familiar with a certain part of him, maybe we even got to experience several, but I was quote unquote hired by his wife to run the Institute. And so I would interact with Gene in different ways, and you know, he would have writings and I would stop and pick him up, and I didn't know who he was at the time, you know, and so I never had this feeling like he was someone that I really looked up to. He was always just another human being, and another flawed human being, just like we all are. And we would still have these very deep conversations. And for some reason, he really respected my ability to run an organization. And he was always curious about that. And wanting it to be more than just like when I would organize a workshop. and many of you may have heard this before, you know, he said, Melinda, you know, I don't want just to have a workshop and it ends, you know, what comes next? And that was why when we, you know, and I think a lot of his messages and his whispering in my ear over the 14, 15 years I was with the Institute, I've sort of carried forward. And one of his dreams was always to get focusing in existing structures and in institutions. And that's partly why when Pat and I created Focusing Initiatives, we really took his dream and tried to make it happen. So that, you know, Pat has worked with the International Rescue Committee and the World Health Organization, and any organization or individuals that we work with internationally, it's bringing focusing into that space. So it's sort of keeping Gene's dream and honoring him for what he has created. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from everybody, or as many of you who have known Gene, in terms of what your experience of him is, as well as those who don't know Gene, but his writings have changed and influenced your lives. And I'm really pleased that Shaka Faye is part of this morning program, and I want to welcome Shaka Faye and saying a few words.
Shaka Faye has
Thank you,
been
Melinda.
organizing this with us. So she's the third organizer.
Well, I don't have the privilege of saying phrases like when I visited with Gene, or that memory I had with Gene, or the things he said to me. And I think there'll be more people like me as time goes by who won't have the privilege of those memories. But yet I discovered Gene the day after he died, and I didn't know that he had passed away. I had stumbled upon his work. Oh, sorry, I'm in the mountains. The power just went out, so it's going to be a little bit dark. Maybe that's okay. And I just there was something about it. It just drew me in. And I remember at least for the first 3 months, the only thing I read and listened to and watched was Gene. I was just so absorbed by this human being, and I wanted to hear everything he had to say. And at one point, I realized that now I had come to the end of all the YouTube videos there possibly was of Gene, and I was listening to all of it again. And I noticed that he often was being interviewed by this woman, Lynn, and I looked her up and I found out that she was in New York. I was in New York. But then I'd also found out that he had just passed away right after, the day after I had discovered him. And so it's such an honor and privilege to be here today, where the purpose of our gathering is to celebrate this life who's brought so much to all of us. And yet, you know, having watched his videos over and over again, something that really stays with me is how embodied he was with the philosophy, and so I think that's what I crave most, is to interact with your memories of all of you who have it, because none of us will have a chance to have that. So I'm really grateful for those of you who are bringing that to this fireplace who are around today to share with us who crave it so much and thirst for it so much. So thank you.
Dr. Faye, why don't you tell everybody where you are before we move on?
Oh, I'm actually in these remote mountains in Bangladesh right now, in the hill tracks in a place called Bandarban. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shaka Faye. And it would be lovely if when people speak, they just say where they're from, because I think we're from many, many, many places in the world this morning. And Steve, I wonder if you could introduce Rabbi Goldie for us. First, we'll be hearing from the people who knew Gene, and then we'll be hearing from the people who know Gene through his work, and then we'll all be talking together about how to carry Gene's work forward, questions we have, and all of that. The way that we always do things is to have things planned, but then unplanned. So we'll see what we make together, because that's so much a part of the focusing philosophy, is that what's alive is emergent. We're going to make it.
Rabbi Goldie Milgram and I haven't met except through an email or two that when I reached out to her to share her experience and stories from her relationship with Jean. I won't speak about it now, but I had a long-term connection with Jean, where the central thread of it was enlivening and relating to and using focusing to to both make sense of, make personal sense of, and broaden the meanings of the language of Jewish liturgy. And so in the course of in those days, telephone conversations that we had, Jean had mentioned Rabbi Goldie Milgram, and so I recalled that as we were thinking about this, and her connection with Rabbi Zalman Schachter, who had a focusing partnership with Jean. So I'm going to introduce you, Rabbi Goldie, and make room for you to share that particular thread of Jean with us.
Thank you, Steve, and I look forward to lots of sharing in the future. Thank you. There I was in my apartment on the Upper West Side at that time in New York City. And you know, if those of you who know New York City, a lot of the apartments have doormen, or door people, as I like to call them, and welcomers and screeners. And so you would almost never have somebody come to your door who hadn't had a phone call that came upstairs from the front desk telling you the following person wants to come upstairs. Is it okay? So there I am in my apartment, and suddenly there's a knock at the door. I go to the door, look through the keyhole because there had been no call, and I don't see anybody. So I figure, well, it was probably the door across the hall, go back to whatever I was doing, and then I hear the knock again. So I go back to the door, look through the keyhole, no one's there, and unlatch the latches, as New Yorkers do, to the door, and there is a tiny elder man with this radiant smile. And I say, "Are you lost? Can I help you?" And he says, "Well, only existentially." And I say, "Well, what brings you here?" And he says, "Oh, I was sent by Reb Zalman, who's one of my teachers and mentors. And he said that I should do some work with you, have a session with you." And I said, "Oh, well, why don't you come in? If you're from Reb Zalman, please come in." And he came in and we had some tea, and he started telling me, and he gave me permission to write and share about any and all of our times together. He said, "You know, I came because I've been feeling unrooted." And he told me that he had grown up in Orthodoxy and a good Jewish education, and that he had been practicing Buddhism for like 60 years, and yet he was in a stuck place. And he pointed at his abdomen, that he was in a stuck place, and that Reb Zalman said that perhaps, since we're neighbors, apparently he lived not far down the block, that it would be helpful. So we sat down, and I had him follow, breathe, take a short breath and a long breath, a short breath, a long breath, and a short breath, as was my custom, and to notice in his body a technique I'd drawn from a variety of feminist retreats on where that stuckness was, and was there a voice of it. And he smiled and he did that. And as we worked in that experience, we found the Tetragrammaton, the Yud He Vav He, the 4 letters that in the Torah, in the Bible original scrolls, appear as though they were on a wood chop, as though they were written together and pressed onto the scroll. And they come from, it's called the most sacred name of that sense of the divine. And it's made out of all of the forms of is, was, and will be. So I like to think of that as the infinite, the divine as the infinite potential for change that is inherent in the interdependence of all that is. And as he took that concept, which instantly, from his background, he understood the reframing that was being done. He instantly flipped with that. And then I said, is there a way in that stuckness? Is it any different now? And he says, yes, I found those letters are a magic carpet. And I said, well, stay with the magic carpet and see if it has something for you that with the letters on it. And I had the image of like a Muslim prayer carpet, you know, with the letters on it. That was just, I haven't seen a Jewish prayer carpet, but I happened to have been gifted a Muslim prayer carpet one day. And I say, just be with it. Let it be with you. See what comes. And then he said, I found it. I know what it is. I knew there was something more than my work at the University of Chicago. Now remember, I didn't know anything about him. At the University of Chicago, he said, I knew there was something from my past, from my roots, that was very deeply helping me find focusing. And he said, it was when Elijah was there, and in the mountain, in the text, and it was the voice of the divine wasn't in the destruction. It wasn't in the storm. It wasn't, and he told me the text from memory in Hebrew. He said it was in that still, subtle place. And then he said, I just went through. The carpet, I just invited me to be on it. And here I am, and I'm there. And he looked out the window with all that. And now I know that I knew that when I was very young. I had it in me, and it was in my story in the yeshiva where I was so stuck, he said, where I couldn't get past the words, but it was already there. And so for many years, for a long time, he would come for these times together. And I learned so much from him. You all know from me that in each interpersonal engaging time, he was so much more than most that one would be with in this curious ability to connect everything and show that interdependence. And even if whichever of us was sad or stuck, it was we would be there for each other. And I couldn't possibly tell you in strong enough words the gratitude and his encouraging of me to bring that new languaging for that throughout my tradition, throughout our shared tradition, throughout Judaism, as he, of course, was doing with others, because all great people like that are deploying themselves to all of the possible nodes where they think there's a need for healing and re-engagement within all of the sacred pathways, of which I include all the sciences and everyone who's even an academic is a seeker, or they they wouldn't be there asking questions and research. There's so many paths. And so I had been unconsciously doing that form of work for a very long time. And one day, we'd been meeting for a very long time. He handed me a book and said, it was this ratty looking copy of this little paperback. And he said, I realize I never mentioned to you that I once wrote a book. And I'm looking at the cover of this book and seeing New York Times bestseller under the description. And he said, I think that you would really enjoy this because, we've been articulating this in different ways and I've been working on it for a long time. And he said, and by the way, I'm part of an organization. And he mentioned Melinda and Lynn and a bunch of different people. And he said, I think you'd love to meet them. He said, but I didn't want to tell you too soon because I wanted us both to be able to see the nuances of what we were doing, because Reb Zalman said that would be important, so we could add each other's stuff to the repertoire. And that's how I discovered, Gene Gendlin discovered himself into my life. And I felt like a tiny little dot that had glimpsed a fractal of the holographic universe he was showing of who he was with and what he had discovered. And it was just such a great blessing. Thank you for the opportunity to share the full story.
Thank you so much. I love that image of the tiny little. Yes.
I want to add that his thing about don't use the word spirituality, he didn't mean that this isn't all possible to talk about under the title spirituality. It was that the valence of the word was too woo-woo, or was it about crystals? For some people it was an entry word, and for other people it was an absolute distancing word. And so I know my organization's called Reclaiming Judaism, and I write on Judaism through a spiritual lens. But when I'm talking to people and working on it, I'm using their fresh language. I'm inviting them to have their fresh language, or a new hit like with the Tetragrammaton. It's about their connection. It's nothing. Anything that's dogmatically labeled is going to be an obstacle to healthy evolution, and I think he taught us that.
Yes. Thank you. That's absolutely right. So we want to hear from anybody else who would like to share anything, an incident, a story, a thought.
Oh, I'm Ruth Rosenblum. I'm in house sitting for a friend in LA. The current time I don't have a home, having just sold one, so I'm on some kind of journey here. When I saw everyone's faces, I almost was in tears. I'm not, wow, this is so emotional for me. I'm surprised. I don't know what I would have done without focusing. And I think Shefika's comment about the memories and that there are going to be all these young people, the new generation of focusing people, deeply touched me. I'm seeing faces of my teachers and faces of my colleagues and people who have really moved this forward. Melinda's work has just been extraordinary. Lynn, you're just my mentor. Allah's work. I mean, it's just so many people here who have done such beautiful work, and so many young people that gives me so much hope. So I just, I guess I wanted to share just a couple of things, mostly that I'm just happy to see everybody, and the power of this work, which I can't imagine what my life would have been like without it. Gene once said at a conference when someone asked him about spirituality, he said, focusing takes us to a door that can open up into this other worlds. And it does. And it does experientially. It's not any dogma. It's not anything conceptually. It's like I could come to know the truth of a spirit, the expanded world, the great system, by going deep enough in focusing. I did have the great gift of going with Lynn and doing a little bit of interviewing with Gene before his death. It also had to do something with Judaism. And I was shocked to find just how connected he was with all these traditions, his own tradition. He had a whole stack of Hebrew books and said that he prayed every night. That he prayed this traditional Jewish prayer every night before going to bed. And he had studied Buddhism for 60 years and read the work of the great Christian mystics. It was the all. He was in deepest expanded connection with the sacred in everything, and found this language and this way to bring it real into our lives experientially. So thank you, Gene, and thanks everyone for being here. And again, Melinda, thank you for that organization, for keeping it going, and for your new organization. And Lynn for, and I'm just picking out two people. I know Ruth Hirsch is here, and there are all sorts of folks here who have just been teachers and bringing things forth. So I'm grateful, and Steve and Flora and all of you. Thank you. And thank you to the young people, because it's in your hands. And Shaka Faye, you got it, you got it. And you will be a leader here, and others too, I know. So
Thank you, Ruth.
thank you.
Lynn, we have Steve and then the other Ruth as well.
Okay, Shaka Faye, I love you calling on people. So that we're counting on you for that.
No, I'm not calling. They volunteered. They've just sent me messages letting me know.
If we don't see them, you'll mention it. So we're looking forward to hearing from Steve next.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you to Ruth and Rick Goldie, and share a few things. I was blessed to be in what became a focusing partnership with Gene from 2005, early 2005 to I think mid to late 2012. And as I mentioned before, the listening partnership that we had hinged around experience. It's not the right good enough word, but experientializing and opening up the language of Jewish tradition within the liturgy. and going from there to broader understandings and bodily felt implicit understandings, and then also life situations, and sometimes the application of concepts from prayer that came to us. So what I'd like to do is, I said, kind of like the image came to me today is of it's kind of like I'm wearing I've got a number of beads on a wristband, and on those beads are a few kind of anecdotal moments of things that Jean had said in the I'll share some of them in the context of our partnership. And one of the things that I want to be able to say is it was in the days of telephone, and so we would have, we would meet every couple of weeks via the telephone. And I just want to extend that kind of statement that Reb Goldie made about sort of kind of living in the sacred. And there was something about when I was on the telephone, and it was, kind of a traditional focusing partnership. So who's going to go first? And then each of us listened to each other and such, and were present. There was an encompassing vibe, and it touches me just to say it, in each of those times that we were together. So I'm going to share with you some of the beads, if you will. So the first, and I'm going to represent them in some way or another. These are kind of like they provide sort of guiding support for me in my life currently and in aspirations going forward. And there's some unfulfilled curiosity in some of these little pieces that I will share with you. So we have our first, and also that Reb Zalman in some kind of way played some role in the connection. I won't go into that. So anyway, we meet, and he says to me, and we're on the phone in our first conversation, and he says, I remember this, he said, "For all the people who let me in, how can I not be a Jew?" And then he spoke about some words about the 13th century German mystic, Meister Eckhart, who had been really, really important to him as well. So for all the people who let me in. So there was that big. And he said to me, "I'm Jewish, but God isn't." And many of you who have experienced him as well as experienced his work would be able to appreciate that kind of deep, deep connection with all that that relates to that statement. Jewish is a particular expression of the big thing. So I remember also in that first conversation, we were, what we were going to do, and him running from the telephone in this very kind of enthusiastic way, and leaving the room and coming back with his prayer book. In Hebrew, it's called Siddur, his prayer book, and taking it and then excitedly opening up the prayer book and finding something that was in there. And then we began to kind of take some words that he may have found or may have found him, and then begin to focus and move from those words and those concepts to the edge, if you will, and to bring them alive. And I want to share another connected when he was saying, "I'm Jewish, but God isn't." I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways in which he referred to God share that with you as well. One, he referred to God as being the whole big show. That was one of the ways he expressed it with me. And he also spoke about what he referred to as the God above and the God below. And I don't think he was separating, that middle space, that there wasn't any of the implicit divine connection. That's how I would call it. But that he was referring to the trust that he had in being able to, that's what so much of what focusing can be, relate to the trust in the relationship and the dependability of relating to the God below. And so when we go inside, that kind of thing. And so those are some words. And the other thing that he said, which was he was talking about, I didn't know about how his background, or that much about his childhood background religiously, but in the morning prayers, there's a statement that says something like, "The soul you placed in me is pure." And he spoke to me and he said that, he mentioned that, and he said, every time I say that, tears come to my eyes. And, he wrote, I wish I'd had the, I wish I'd had the piece, the whatever I would have needed to have inquired more. He wrote beautifully about tears in an article on emotion. And if anybody's read Kathy McGuire's wonderful work on tears, those tears had lots of meaning, and I didn't get a chance to kind of appreciate what that was, just the nature of the relationship at that point. And then two more beads. One is that I'd gone to a conference and met some of you there back in 2005. It was the first international that I went to. And he asked me, well, what mattered most to you about it, or what, and that kind of thing. And I said that the experience of being with people and having from different cultures, different religions, different nationalities, and having an experience at the focusing conference of connecting, of some sort of, a form of connecting with our common humanity, even beyond our languages or beyond our languages. And he said to me, and he drew on one section in the Shabbat prayers, Sabbath prayers. He said, "Oh, you're referring to V'nei Amar." And there's a phrase that says, "V'nei Amar Hayad Adonai Lamelech al kol haaretz vayom hahu bayom hahu yiyah Adonai echad." So I'll translate that last part. And he said something like, "Oh, you're thinking about that." And the last part says, "On that day, Adonai, another name for God, will be one, and God's name will be one." So that's another inspiring kind of bead on my wristband. And then I also remember a little piece in one of our phone calls. It was after 2007, after I returned from the international conference in Israel, and his excitedly calling out to Mary, his wife, and saying, "Mary, it's Steve," and he was in Israel. And again, it was another sort of unfulfilled curiosity for me, because we didn't talk much about that, other than that, and whatever went into that enthusiasm. And finally, after sharing, he encouraged me, and I did at the synagogue I go to, although I haven't been there in COVID land for quite a while. He said, I did a piece with co-working with a rabbi, and it was called Focusing in the Living Torah. And so I it was a couple of weeks that we did this, and so it's guiding people around text and then connecting with themselves before and after the reading of it. And he said to me, he said to me, and I wish I could have, asked more. He said, "Oh, it's come home." He said that in his conversations with Reb Zalman would kid him and he'd say, "Oh, so you want to bring focusing into the pews?" And I think he did. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Excuse me, it's dinner time here, so hopefully there's no veggies in my teeth. So, hi, everybody. And I also would like to thank Lynn and Melinda and Shukafe for putting this together. It's really lovely, and I really appreciated all your comments at the beginning. So I just want to say a really small something. I met Gene the first time in 1995 when he came to my week-long in Chicago. I think that was the last Chicago week-long before the Institute moved to New York. I'm not going to speak very long here. He came in, he taught one whole day of the week-long and demonstrated focusing with dreams, which he loved. And I was one of the people that he worked with. And I was so impressed by his, the word was there and it's not there now, but just, well, the word I wanted, one of the words I wanted was humility. That one's easy, but just not putting on airs, whatever that word is, that means not putting on airs. He was so unpresuming or something like that. So that always impressed me. And then after that time, I saw him again in 96, I think at the International, and then probably again after that when there was some kind of conference. I think it was in Toronto, I'm not sure, but he was leading a big focusing gathering, and he was doing teaching the way that he does teaching, which was everybody would come in, or all the people would come in, and he would do some little lecture, and then he'd say to all his assistants, just go out and sit there and help them do it. So it's very different than what teaching is nowadays, or at least the way that I've been teaching for the last almost 30 years. But to me, and I share this with my students, is Gene taught by his being. He exuded focusing, he exuded love and acceptance and warmth and humility. He exuded a safety that I think is very, very rare still. And it's what I always aspire to give to people. It was so beautiful. Every time I saw him, for years after that, for a couple of years, I was in a pretty serious relationship with one of his focusing partners, who is unfortunately no longer on the planet. But he would just say hello to me with such warmth and acceptance, even though I lived in California and he lived in New York, and I only saw him at these big gatherings. So that's mostly what I wanted to share. Something else just came to me that I'd like to share, because maybe it will help somebody at some point. No idea, but I remember during the internationals when he would come, and he came to quite a few in those years, 96, and then there was one in Toronto and one in Wisconsin, and so he would always speak, and everybody was like, yeah, we're gonna go listen to Gene. And I would sit there, and I was one of these I was not a groupie at that point. And now I think of the years and the effort that I'm putting into learning his philosophy and studying with Lynn, and then studying with Rob Parker. Well, first it was Rob Parker, and then it was Lynn, which was wonderful. And then it was Rob Parker again. And I'm continuing to kind of chew it up. And I'm getting little by little, I'm loving it. But I remember sitting there thinking, what the heck is he talking about? And why doesn't he just use English? And while I'd be sitting there, I'd get some little glimpse of, wow, that is something. But then a minute later, I would have no idea what it was, because I didn't know how important, the importance of experiencing and trusting our experience, and that everything that happens to us, we don't need to understand. But if we get it in, I'll use one of the words from the home, in our kishkas, in our gut, if we get it in our bodies, something happens that changes us, and we're not aware of these subtle changes, but it is happening. And I can just give testimony after years of making this practice my life and oh, by the way, I'm sorry, Lynn asked us to say where we are. I'm in Jerusalem, which is why I was eating dinner. It's almost 7 o'clock here. And I would never have moved to Israel. I would never have come here. I came here for the first time in 2000. I would never have come here if it weren't for focusing. It's totally changed my life. But I want to say that about his philosophy for anybody who's thinking about dabbling. It is not easy, and it's really worth it. And I think just about everything Gene did is totally worth it. And I'm sorry that y'all didn't get to meet him, because his person was infectious. And it is so different than me. I'm macrobiotic, non-smoker, but Gene's physical presence was very different. But his heart is infectious and wonderful, and seems to live with us still, like in groups like this. So thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
So I'm going on a hike tomorrow early, and so I'm going to stop my video here, but I'm enjoying listening.
Thank you. Lynn, we have Rosa.
And hello, Shakufe. Hello, Melinda. Hello, everyone. I'm going to take a moment to breathe before I start speaking. So I'm going to start by building a little bit on what Ruth said about Gene's accessibility or non-pretentiousness or like that. And then I want to say a little something about his vision of socio-political, cultural change and transformation, at least as I understood it. I first met Gene in, I believe it was 2006. I had moved to the East Coast in 2005. And I remember really clearly the sense of like wanting to approach him, and at the same time feeling shy, feeling like, oh, I'm a nobody, you know, like sure, I've gotten my focusing certification or whatever, but there's all these people who have teachers and have been around him for a long time. And yet feeling so drawn and approaching him and feeling the effect of that openness and curiosity and willingness to meet new people and just discover who that person across from him was, and was really powerfully affected by that. And I don't remember all the details. I know I was at a TAE conference in 2006 or workshop, and Kai was there, and other folks were there. And we had a conversation there, and shortly afterwards, he was following up on it with me. He said he was really, when I told him that my background was in organization to development, he said he was really interested in talking with me about something. And he followed up with me, and I remember being, at the rented house I was living in at that time, and just like not believing that I was talking with Gene on the other end of the phone, because he actually had followed up. And so he had this project that he wanted help with. And this project was, he wanted to create, and we ended up doing this, a series of phone conference calls where people who were looking to bring focusing into to do crossings of focusing with focusing and other areas. And I don't remember all the people who were there, but I do know that Suzanne Noel was there, and this was at the very beginning of her wanting to cross focusing with 12-step. And some folks from the NVC world were there, and they were, and so Gene had been like kind of keeping his ears open for people who spoke about potential crossings and keeping a list of them and bringing them all together. And yeah, so we had some very lovely phone conversations. And I know I took notes of all of that, and that those notes are in my file somewhere, because I don't throw anything out. So I know that I want to go back and find those at some point. But so that was the practice. And the theory of it, I only heard later, a year or two later, at one of these events, when I heard Gene talking about the town. And Gene's teachings about the town went straight into my soul and straight into my heart, because it was, a really big vision. He was talking about the course of evolution, and how, back when there was feudalism, and then at some point capitalism came up, but how it wasn't like this sudden transition, but how while there was still a lot of feudalism, there were these towns within which something new was happening, because people there weren't just serfs, and they were relating to each other in all these different ways, and that kind of prefigured the transition. And what was the transition that we were in now, and where were those towns of what is wanting to be birthed? And he felt so strongly that the town had to do with people who had a handful of these practices. Just like God isn't Jewish, the town was not just focusing. He wanted people to learn at least 5 different practices, and then work to weave the connections between them, so that we who were already here doing all these different practices of somatics and NVC and focusing and this and that would start to recognize each other, and would start to realize that this practice of what he called interhuman attention, and the power of interhuman attention. And so I really took it to heart, right? His encouraging people to not just be parochial, to not just hang out with other focusers. And one other teaching that he gave along these lines that also really struck to my heart, because it has to do with what I like to call micropolitics, right? Like, he talked about how whenever we are in a gathering of a particular sort, everybody will just wear their hat of that thing, right? And so if we're in a focusing gathering, we just all talk like focusers, or if we're in a Jewish gathering, we all just talk like Jewish people, or this or that. And he said, and he told a story about having been part of this group where, after like having been there for 5 or 10 years, he realized that he and the person who always sat next to him shared this whole other area of interest, which they had not realized, because when they were in this particular group, they were just wearing that particular hat, right? So for a long time now, I've had a vision of something I would very much like to do, which is to host a gathering at some point where we invite focusing people specifically to mention, what are some of the other hats you wear, right? When you're not being a focuser, what are some of the other things you're doing? And then have breakout groups, so that those of us who are focusing and NVC could meet in them, and those of us who are focusing and somatics could meet in them, and like that. Because Gene, I want to take a risk here and say something that's meant a little bit as a joke, but not really, that like any other good Jewish person, like he had a sense of deep, huge commitment to societal change, that this is about healing the world. And so much of it was encompassed in the work of focusing and the healing that brings to people. But it was much bigger. It was much bigger than that. And so, so I'm going to pause and check inside and see if there's one more thing or not. And then I'm going to pass over the mic. Yeah, just one more small thing. And this is just like Steve said at some point, oh, I wish I had asked more. But I remember at one point when I was having a phone call with him, and this was at a later time. And I also did know him in different contexts, because I was also part of the board of the Focusing Institute and there's many other Gene stories I could tell, but for now, there's just this one small thing, which is that we were having a weekly conversation about focusing and social change and different things like that. And it was right around the time of the Zuccotti Park Occupy. And I just remember the excitement in his voice. I said something, and it was just he was aware and following what was happening on the political level as much as he was aware of what was happening in the spiritual one. And so I just want to speak to that and to say that, his all-inclusive interest really included how spirit manifests in the world and how we can evolve as a culture into a more humane and focusing is a huge part of it, especially the vision that he and Mary created about what would it be like to have institutions where the human spirit is acknowledged, schools where the human spirit is acknowledged, and hospitals where the human spirit is acknowledged. And so his whole wanting to bring focusing into institutions that Melinda spoke about earlier is also a huge part of his social, political, cultural vision of the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rosa. And maybe toward the end of our gathering, we can see how we might team up in certain projects, like your project of having a town meeting where we aren't only wearing our one hat, but all the other hats. And maybe another meeting we can several people will help you do that. I would love to come to that.
Thank you so much, Lynn. That sounds lovely. I would love to co-create that with anybody who's interested.
Lynn, I saw Shakafe made a really good suggestion that maybe we make space for those who didn't know Gene to share at this moment.
Sounds good. I was just
Lynn, I'm wondering, when did you want to show the video? Should we do it now or later? Now, maybe?
I think maybe we'll hold off on that because we want to hear from the people who didn't, anybody else, but also the people that didn't know Gene, and we want to give time to that. And we'll see if we don't have time for it for the little video. We'll do that a different time.
But can I say it would be really nice to hear Gene's voice today, if it's possible, even if it's 30 seconds of it?
Yeah, you're right. I think you're right. That will give us a transition and we could take a breath. Yes, let's hear just like 5 minutes of this little video of Gene working with Nada Lou on her TAE project. And we just get a feeling of Gene's being and Gene's curiosity and Gene's way of thinking and connecting with his philosophy and with Nada Lou. So yeah, let's do that. You're right on, Shakafe. So we'll take a breath. and bring Gene himself into the group.
And yet it does something, that's already an interesting pattern. We can understand that the absence has effects, like, you know, if you don't have food, then you starve, but that's not what this means. This doesn't mean the absence. It means there is a kind of presence of something that's not here. So that's an interesting pattern.
So you have a paradox here too.
Oh,
There is
yeah, the-
absence and presence, eh?
Yeah, I have it and I don't have it. It's
Right,
present, it's
right,
not present.
right,
It's,
right,
and
okay.
even perhaps doing something to bring itself about or to let itself come, or I don't know, something, but I'm not sure of that.
Okay.
What I like is something that's not there is doing something. The way in which it's not there can vary. And somehow in the middle of doing this, I got very interested in, that's also a pattern. It's like I can know that there is an answer, even though that's all I have, is the knowledge that somewhere there's an answer. And it's different to say, God knows a more right way, because when I say that, I'm somehow connected to where the answer is. It's a little different. It's like if I know there is an answer in a library in a book, or I could call a specialist in somewhere.
Dig it out.
That's one kind
Right,
of thing.
right.
This is different. It means that there is an there is an answer in the universe or something, and I'm part of it. And there's always a struggle of whether I'm really part of it, but I don't know. Let me explain that.
Yeah.
But it also exists in some sense in the universe. What does that mean? Well, let's see if I can explain that. The body, the organism, the living thing, every animal, and we too, have certain patterns that are built in with us. So when a child arrives here, there is already a mother and a father that's implied in the child. The child is ready for a perfect mother and a perfect father, and every little infant knows what is a mother. And then, of course, it's sent to a human being, so then it doesn't come out like that, because there aren't any perfect human beings, and so there aren't any perfect mothers, so something will, you know, go wrong.
Goes wrong, yeah.
But then the question say, you know, I was never loved, I can't possibly know even what that is to be loved, then I know that's not true. Your body knows what it is to be loved. See? And then there's this question, which is more real? Well, in terms of fact and history, what's more real is the mother that you had, right? But they're not really. In another sense, it's an accident. You know, they could just as well have sent you next door to that other lady. But the mother is actually a reality in every creature, in every living thing. And living things exist. Looking at myself in this way, I said, I know that there is a more right way than this. You see what I mean? Then it feels to me like the more right way is more real. So all that stuff I mean there, when I say it's a little more than knowing that there is an answer. I feel like I'm in contact with the answer, but not that I can control this contact or something. Recently, I'm better at it. The contact, you know, I would be afraid that I would spoil something if I poured myself into the universe, because I'm so full of stuff that I don't think the universe should have to carry. But then when I realized that, oh, well, come on, I'm already part of the universe. It's only a pretense that I'm enclosing myself in some kind of just me, responsible for just me, and this is me, and this is not me. That's actually not real. So the poor universe is already carrying me. if you see what I mean, and I can't protect it. So then I feel like, oh yeah, right. Wherever that right way is, I'm inhaling it. I'm there. Or I'm growing out of it, or something or other. And I still don't have it, but it's different than just saying I know that there is an answer. So I made 3 things for this pattern: knowing that there is an answer, being part of this big thing that has the answer, and then the hollow brick felt sense where I actually have it. The pattern is sort of like this. The one line of the pattern is something that isn't here is doing a lot of work, or is doing something. And then I'm scaling that over 3 this way. So I'm saying there is where I know there is an answer, but I haven't got it. Then I'm sort of in touch with whatever that is that has it, even though I can't get it. And then there is a felt sense, which is the one we're always talking about, where you know but you don't know, and all these. I'm so familiar with having a felt sense that I'm not interested in that. I'm only interested in the continuum here, that you can actually do this when you can't even get a felt sense. It's not just in my examples, it's that then I can apply it all over the scene, all over the world. And the it is something
is not
that's
here,
missing, and yet it's
but it
doing
exists,
something.
yeah.
Look at all these different cases. Well, and then it's also true in business, of course, all the time, that they're talking about the vision is supposed to help guide them to make something happen, right? Let what the child has guide the process to the learning that you want to have happen, right? Okay, now that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so nice to have Gene with us and his wonderful way of thinking and being. Does anybody have any response to that that they want to share?
I knew Gene. I met him in 1970. It changes. And I studied him. It was a little while. What I just want to say from that is that bringing everything in, that he had an incredible skill to be able to do that. And I just remember once it changes, we were in a small room. A young man comes into the room in this room. And then he discovers that this bloke is describing the ceiling. No one knew that. No one, we thought he was just absolutely, but no, he was describing something that was present. And Gene picks up on it. His sensitivity was just extraordinary. And in my life, he changed my life, a turning point in my life. He valued me and valued my sensitivity. And that's, you know, I can't say any, and thank you very much for giving me this short opportunity to say that. I'm here in Sheffield now, and I teach focusing here in Sheffield.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I'll say something about that because he brought it up, and we went out by the river to do what can be called a hitbodedut, making yourself alone with God, or hishtapchut nefesh, pouring out your soul like water. And the idea is that you can't damage the divine. There's no judging, there's no, and I didn't like to use the term the divine. I like to call it all that is and ever will be. You know, the sense of that, what he was talking about. And so we would both find a separate place and pour out our hearts, whatever was afflicting or needed that audience, as though there is a listening God. And that's because there's a paradox. One way to frame that is there's a paradox that, for me at least, he was different. He really believed in all of that. The God I don't literally believe in is the one can pour one's heart out to, as though there's a listening God. Because unless and you would, Mary, who became a good friend, also, if one doesn't take, she called, that whole thing of opening a space. So this ancient practice of really, you would let everything come up, like vomiting almost in words, everything come out until, and I made up a word for it, you feel emptified. And in that emptified place is where the opportunity to connect to what he was just talking about, it comes, it arises. And you all know this as focusers. And that's an ancient spiritual practice. And so if we get out of needing to believe in anything or thinking that the words mean anything, it's the embodied experience is so true that it can feel like love. Some kind of pure love. Maybe your experiences are different. I'm trying to find words for the unlanguageable. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? We have only about 20 minutes more. So maybe we could keep our comments short and see if we can include as many of us as we can. And I just encourage anybody to speak, even if focusing is brand new to you. And you didn't know Jean at all. We want to make room for all of us in this big us to make our voices known. Anything you have there is welcome.
Yeah, I'm relatively recent in terms of formally studying focusing in the training for focusing oriented therapy. But, as a healing arts practitioner, I was exposed to Jen Lin's work in my training as a polarity therapist, 20 plus years ago. And having studied Peter Levine's somatic experiencing work. Peter Levine, many people know who are in the therapy community of trauma healing, Peter Levine built somatic experiencing on Jen Lin's work. So Jen Lin's work has so permeated the culture of contemporary mind-body healing that many, many people that don't know his name and don't know the name of focusing. And so I just wanted to name that here as it hasn't been mentioned, because it just moves me on such a profound level.
Thank you
There's so
so
many
much.
teachers I can name where are just drawing on his work.
Thank you.
So he's really changed the culture in profound ways. Thank you.
Well, I didn't know Jean. I wish I had. And today that we are celebrating his birthday and his life here, I just want to honor his life, and not only his, but all of you people who were there with him and who learned directly from him and who passed this on. And much of what we have, of course, we have his writings and all the things he wrote that is a lot, but also all the people that were very close to him, and how you are and how you have taken his work further. One of the things that I love about Jean is this, he's saying, don't do focusing alone, do focusing and more. And I think that we as humanity has profited from all of this, from his view, from this. I was in the emails of the coordinators' emails. Nada Lu posted this video that Lynn, you shared today. And as I began to see it, I then saw the whole series, and I was amazed by his thinking and by the way not only by the way he did it, but by the way he taught us how to think and sense and live from there. And wow, this is, so I want to celebrate this and all you people that have been there and taking his work further. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
This is Shashi. I wanted to say, I did not know Jean. Somebody offered me a book on focusing about 40 years ago, and I put it up on my shelf, and I didn't know what it was. But in my simplistic understanding, I feel like, because in Indian philosophy, we feel that we are all part of divinity, and some aspect of that lives in us. So Jean kind of concretized and gave us a way of accessing that through focusing. That is my simple understanding. I could be totally wrong. I don't know. But that's what I feel, that because it's very difficult to access it, and this is one way of accessing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shashi.
Vera.
Hello, everyone. I'm Vera from Norway. It's 6:30 in the evening where I am at the moment. I didn't know Jean either. As a person, it's a funny thing. It feels like I know him, you know, from everything that I've read and seen of him over the years, and I've been to some of his courses while he was still alive. But I don't know him as a person. I don't know his faults and his, I'm sure he had some of them too. But he has a very important presence in my life. And I think as a person who spent years and years searching for something, being in different kinds of spiritual realms and being traumatized basically by a lot of the stuff that was out there, finding focusing was such a coming home for me in some way. And in the beginning, something about the simplicity of the process was very important to me. And slowly getting to know the philosophy, I also, one thing that I really cherish about his work is that he allows me to hold complexity. I feel like there's a big lack of that out there. There's so much simplifying and black and white, and it's either this or that out there in so many different layers of everywhere, that I just really find it so, I don't know, yeah, helpful. I don't even know what the word for that is, but it's an evolving thing for me to really slowly be able to have how complex things really are for me, and with life, with politics, with family, with friendship, with just everything. That, so that's one of the biggest things I think at the moment for me with what Jen Lim brought personally for me.
Thank you so much.
Feels like to me that before really getting into this work, all I really had was my head. And my wife, Olivia, can attest to that. Now it's just sometimes she slaps me. And I'm so grateful that Jean's generosity and wisdom is carried forward here, like within this group with y'all. Like, that's why I'm here. Like, people here have trained, supported Lynn, Melinda, Cynthia, Steve, many others. And I'm just so grateful for that carrying forward. Lynn asked me to mention that we have a millennials group where Ruth, you mentioned that it's up to us younger generation here, and I was very present to that. The older people here are the ones that know Jean, and I was like, oh man, like there's what happens like years and years, decades and decades from now? Like, how is this going to be carried forward? And Lynn and Steve helped put together this group of millennials that we've been very grateful to get to support with Melinda, and of the elders of the focusing community. So there's a wanting to invite you, if you are also an elder that feels that y'all want to kind of share and carry forward this work with those of the younger generation. Please email Lynn. She didn't tell me to say that, but I'm sure that's quite okay. One final thing, go ahead, Lynn, please.
Maybe, Jonathan, you could put your email address in the chat also, that people might want to directly connect with.
Yes.
And I have to add, and if you're a millennial, you're also welcome to connect.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, thank you. That was, to me, that was like the obvious part that wasn't said. So that was not obvious. The last thing I'll say is, for me, I was moved to tears when I read the introduction to TAE. Experiencing and the Creation of Meaning. I was only introduced to this work from a psychotherapeutic context, which, don't get me wrong, that's blown my mind many times. But I'm like, oh my God, this can be everywhere. Like, I didn't know that Jean had that vision of the world. And so personally, like, I'm so excited to bring this work into Silicon Valley. And like, how do we think about new ideas? Creating companies that are more holistic, and maybe something like a focusing app, or I don't know, but I'm just excited by what's possible in that direction. Thank you. Thank you all.
Lynn, we have Rachel, and then maybe going to the last part of the program.
Hey, I'll just be quick. I heard about Jean a long time ago when I knew people who did nonviolent communication, and they told me that it was possible, all the things you were thinking and your needs, that you could experience them in your body. And it sounded so magical and strange and interesting and odd. And it took me another 15 years to actually find focusing. Yeah, Jean died soon while I was doing my training. But I'm just struck with, although I didn't meet Jean, it's amazing I can be in my home and meet you guys, and some little faces I know and I've met, and some I haven't. But like, I feel like I don't know, it's like I've not met Jean, but I've met you, and that's only because of Jean. And having this organization and these meetings and these events and this group, and Jonathan then says that, it's just great. So anyway, thank you.
Rachel, where are you?
So good.
I'm right now, I'm in England, but I've mainly been living not in England. So appreciate community.
That sounds like a wonderful sort of last sharing. And then before we stop, we wanted to just have some ideas about, again, everybody has to be very, very, very brief at this point, so we only have about 7 minutes, about how we want to carry forward this work in the next year. You know, what are some of your ideas? Jonathan's going to bring it into Silicon Valley. We have ideas about the town, and maybe a meeting of all the other hats that we wear. I want to make sure that I invite you to our Help the Helpers group on Monday, usually earlier, 8:15 New York time, when we have all kinds of sharing and people sharing their reflections. Those of you who would like to contribute to our Help the Helpers, we would love that, to just come and take about 15 minutes to share something about your work with focusing that can help inspire all of the helpers around the world, especially in this time when we're still struggling with COVID. So email me or Melinda if you'd like to give a reflection for Help the Helpers, or you just like to come. And we have a wonderful community there.
This is Goldie. I'd like to suggest that we look at all of the fields that are the cutting edge, at the cutting edge these days, as well as where the cutting edge and focusing is, and that we try to be part of them and be creating those intersectionalities. I have found riches in the field of neuropsychology, and where Elon Musk is going I've been following his work in that field and the interfaces that he's creating, and being able to be helpful when there's stuckness there, using offering focusing intervals in some places. But the more we have, if we bring in here those who are doing things that maybe while we were away doing our focusing work, there were other major streams going on, so that we don't obsolesce, or I do know that people sometimes think we have, that we are where the action is, so to speak, and really being nourished by that and nourishing them with these methodologies. And the second thing I'd love to have is that maybe once a week there's a Jean Genlin course that we know that we're going to get an email. Okay, session 1 was today, and you just keep moving through them in cycles, so that we can just keep enriching and nourishing, or something like that. And then that there would be discussion time at those release times, where you would know if you wanted to discuss what you just studied. There, somebody might be there at the other end, or one of us could volunteer at different times to be at the other end.
Sounds wonderful. And maybe as we're thinking of these ideas, we might, you might volunteer to organize that. It could be a weekly session where somebody brings in something from Jean, a piece of a video or a text, and people talk about it and discuss it, and that would be ongoing. So that's an idea. Another idea is that we all share these resources, and all the resources that we have are so vast in this community, and they could be all in one spot, all the crossings, all the things that we don't know about. So if somebody would want to volunteer to just receive all of the resources that people have, that would be a fabulous contribution.
Lynn, this feels so important, and we don't have enough time. And I'm just wondering, could we create another time to have this whole conversation, and everybody could be invited who is interested in joining? Because I feel like there's so many voices we haven't heard today.
I wonder if we might continue it at our Help the Helpers next Monday, and that's an earlier time. Would we be able to continue our Celebrate Jean and gathering in our resources next Monday for the Helpers group?
I wonder if there could also be another group similar, but at another time when maybe some other people might also be able to join who can't do it exactly at the usual Help for the Helpers. So just expanding something.
Good.
What is that time, since a lot of us won't know?
It's 8:15 on Mondays in the morning.
What time zone?
Eastern, New York time.
We have that time because people in this time zone often need to go to work by 9:15. So at least we have the 45 minutes, and then we have breakout rooms and discussion. So we're starting as a way of starting our work week. But it would be a wonderful idea to have another group like that, a community gathering where people are volunteering each time to present something that can be reflected on in a different time zone. I'm wondering if there's anybody that would be willing to initiate that, and we in the Help the Helpers would be glad to help and support and get you started on that, and that could be later on, at a different time that other people could make.
Leslie Miley is trying to get your attention.
Oh, good.
It's Miles.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. I just this is just an anecdote which I wanted to share because it just came to me thinking about focusing. I'm from Cape Town and I've been learning freediving. The teacher of the freediving is completely, how he teaches is using the felt sense. He'll say, like, look at this ocean or look at this water, and what comes to your body when you look at the water. Wonderful way of teaching. And it might be that other people in other physical activities, I know that he's got his own spiritual background, but I just find that so thing that he does that. And I've spoken to him about focusing. Anyway, that was just to share that.
Oh, thank you, Leslie. That's beautiful. Yes.
I suspect that we all have so many commitments that taking on something new is like pulling teeth at this point. I'll volunteer if no one else does. They always say, try to find the busiest person to get something done, and maybe somebody out there will offer to help me, because it will go slowly if I am the person trying to find that time.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi Goldie. Maybe maybe you could put your email address in the chat, and maybe we could have some volunteers helping you to get something started at a different time. And we Help the Helpers people would be glad to lend our support.